So here's the album cover, which depicts a conceptual system, a philosophical system, or sort of in reduced form, called Transcendental Qabala. And I will try to give a basic idea of just like really just the gist. So, what I'm trying to do with Transcendental Qabala is arrive at a vision of heaven, and also a vision of how heaven could be achieved. And to do that by elaborating a sort of pretty thorough conceptual scheme that in principle starts from scratch, or maybe starts with music, but that's a whole other topic. Generally, there's this injunction in philosophy to have no presuppositions. The starting point of philosophy is, conventional opinion and its critique, where you sort of start with ideas that are just sort of floating, and by thinking and discussing those ideas, an insight sort of erupts, that one thought that there was a reason for their opinions, and it turned out that there is no ground for most conventional opinions. And it's not just conventional opinion that philosophy attacks, it's also philosophy itself. Previous systems of philosophy that weren't radical enough or exhaustive enough. It's the history of philosophy is in part a history of this kind of auto-critique. So that said, so I'm very interested in trying to hold tight to this principle of starting with no presupposition, despite the fact that no one has ever succeeded at not sneaking in presuppositions, and there's sort of a doomed quality to that project. My slant on it is, first of all, is that there are 4 fundamental questions, or arenas, which present themselves to be explored in a philosophical mode. And the questions can be refined, or they can even be rejected or disqualified, as some of them often are, especially in various strains of contemporary philosophy. But rejecting or disqualifying something is a whole constructive project in itself, and maybe it turns out that that's not so watertight. I think that these fundamental questions are sort of hovering there, whether they have been rejected or not. And there's something intrinsic to philosophizing that they point to, and none of them should be ignored. So the first of those questions concerns axiology, which is value. Basically, it's the question of what is good, or even, to really put it in like a flat-footed way or something, what is human nature, what is the soul's highest potential, and what are the obstacles to achieving it. Can we even talk about that? Is it the same for everybody? Does this change in different eras? Are we learning more about, it's just like that topic is a topic that can't be ignored. shouldn't be ignored. Second topic is metaphysics, which is the question of the eternal structure of the intelligible world. It seems that there is something that can be said about how things are at the most general level and necessary level. And if so, this question of what's the best language for expressing it, and is that, is it really possible at all? But that topic is another gaping abyss for philosophy. The question of being, basically. The third topic is cosmogony, which is a little bit more subtle than those first two, but it's basically the question of what is behind the frame of intelligibility. What is nothingness? What is it that that can't be conceived? Like there's this kind of tradition of imagining that there is something that is unrepresentable or unbearable that maybe is even the cause of history, or at least the cause of human desire or something like that. Once you're thinking about intelligibility, you can also think about what is not intelligible, but then try to think unintelligibility. So that's another big topic. And then finally, eschatology is kind of a cluster of questions that are related. What would the ultimate fulfillment of desire be, of collective desire? But also just what is going to happen ultimately? What is beyond the world that we take for granted, that we could nevertheless still imagine? And then kind of the question of, and how will it happen, or will it happen? And is there any agency that we have in having an effect on that? So I think that these questions, we don't even know what a question is, right? So, but they're arenas. These questions, these arenas deserve to all be considered in the same system. And ideally, they are related. And some will say that you're not really doing philosophy unless you have, both a metaphysics and an ethics, or kind of what I'm calling axiology. And I tend towards thinking that you can't really have an axiology without some kind of understanding of the nature of being and non-being, and that in a way the answer to the question of what is good has to do with eschatology. That's in a way what is good is seeking to do what is best for the world, or something like that. So there's a drive towards making a system out of these questions, but there's also sort of an opposite tendency too, because systems tend to collapse, and they sort of inherently tend to be inconsistent. And it's more intellectually honest, if you're trying to not have presuppositions, to address each of these questions independently and potentially revise the conceptual scheme offered as an answer based on further reflection or experience, or reading something else. The materials that I'm using, that I have been using as I've been developing this, a lot of it is books I've read or am reading, in philosophy, religious texts, structures from math and science, and psychoanalysis and political theory. I have I'm very attracted to as integral an approach as possible. Not really disqualifying any potential source of wisdom, as well as my own practical experience, and but ultimately, I am sort of seeking to really create a scheme. Like that. That's why there are all these made up words. Like it's really sort of an effort to create a system, a sort of unique system that weighs in on these topics and ties them together, that could be of some use, ideally, in orienting, the political conversation or something, or could at least be inspiring to someone else who wants to do something similar, or make something. And for me, it's it's also supposed to orient my own practice, and the way I sort of conduct my own life, as well as kind of my creative practice. So, yeah, I mean, I'll make some more videos that are addressing, these particular topics kind of one by one, and their subcategories and the different terms in the boxes. But that is, a just very kind of 20,000 feet level description of what the system is supposed to kind of be doing.